Hello, everyone. My name is Jos, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this edition of Kushki Talks, where we're diving in a bit deeper on AI in the payments sector. I am so excited to have a conversation with three fantastic panelists who know this industry well and are going to be sharing their insights on AI in payments. Now, we all know AI is about making computers smart enough to do tasks that normally require a lot of human intelligence. Now we're teaching them to understand and respond to spoken language, recognize images, make decisions. And we know that this is changing industries around the world. AI is everywhere, from helping doctors diagnose diseases to detecting fraud in banking, and even powering things like payments across the world much faster. So, we're joined by a fantastic panel of experts today who are at the forefront of the AI evolution in finance and in payments. With me are Sebastian Castro, co-founder and president of Kushki, Tanvi Singh, board member and treasurer of the Global Blockchain Business Council, and Albert Druart, CPO and co-founder of Pago Solution. Let's start with a quick round of introductions to set the stage. After that, I'll be asking each of the panelists today to share their perspective on AI's role in our changing world. So, Sebastian, let's start with you. Can you tell me a little bit more about Kushki and your role at Kushki?
Hi, Yas. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. It's a pleasure, and to my fellow panelists as well. My name is Sebastian Castro. I'm co-founder and president at Kushki. Kushki is a payments processing platform that seeks to connect LATAM through payments. So we have gone sort of market by market in all throughout most of the major markets in Latin America and really standardizing and constructed a modern payments stack on which to transact. And my role at the company is focused on sort of implementing our strategy and vision cross-functionally across teams. And AI has now become a really important part of that conversation because we think that AI is going to fundamentally change how payments platforms operate in that sense. So again, very happy to be here, Yos.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. It's a pleasure for me as well. So please, Tanvi Singh, tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and what you're most excited about with AI changing the way in which we're all working in the payments space.
Thank you, Jos. Thank you, Kushki Pagos, for having me today on this conversation. Other than the fact that I lead the AI and blockchain intersection conversation at Global Blockchain Business Council, which is the biggest blockchain nonprofit association dealing with all things blockchain, including payments. I'm also the founder and the managing partner of Nirmata AI Ventures, which is focused on a lot of upcoming and promising startups from India and from Switzerland in fintech. I also support, given my role as the head of AI and data for UBS for the last 10 years, many upcoming organizations supporting them of how to get themselves AI enabled and what does it mean for companies to start getting AI native, as that's where the future of customer experience and the future of operational excellence lies. So very happy to delve deeper into all these topics and discuss the possibility of integrating AI and its technology to the payment systems that the two of you are working with. Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much, Tanvi. That's wonderful. And finally, over to you, Albert.
Hi, good morning. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me as well. Albert Druart. I'm the CPO and co-founder of Pagos Solutions. We go by Pagos AI. We are a payments data platform that really tries to help merchants. We focus specifically or primarily on merchants, really try and make them see their payments data, that is all the data that their payment systems are generating as an asset. And as part of that, we've built a platform with a bunch of tools around it. And we've been experimenting quite a bit with AI to try and help, because payments is such a both technical but also a commercial enterprise. The idea of bringing more context, more simplicity to the space, especially for merchants who are doing kind of global business or complexity, which is very, very quick in payments to come. We want to make them understand and kind of more productive with it. And that's what we do. So really happy to be here today.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So, we've got listeners from all around the world. And what I really want to do today is, yes, we'll talk a little bit high level about what AI can do for payments companies, what it's going to do to disrupt the industry in general. But when we can, it would be great for us to get really specific on some examples as well. And I know the three of you are in a perfect position to do that. So let's start. Let's kick this off. As we all know, the payments industry is a fast evolving space, but this has significantly accelerated with the rise of AI. The landscape is clearly changing faster than ever before. It's not only helping us with operational efficiencies, it's also giving us an opportunity to reimagine from the ground up things like customer service or personalized transaction or payment safety or fraud detection. So Albert, let's stay with you for a bit here. So, how have you noticed that AI is beginning to shape the way in which you work and shape the way in which you deliver your services?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I was thinking about this over the last few days. I think AI for us in payments, AI has already played a big role, I would say, in the fraud and kind of fraud reduction space. I think for us, the way we think about it is both enabling our own teams. So our development team, our engineering team, even our product team are starting to use the kind of general AI tools as a way of exploring and kind of engaging with the material that's in payments. There's a lot of detail in payments. And then so that's kind of the productivity side for us, as many companies around the world are doing, kind of becoming more productive working with information. On the other side, for our customers, as I kind of alluded to in the introduction, I think for us, it's about bringing a little bit more context, a little bit more help, almost self-service help into working with something that can be quite complicated. Payments is complicated. The information you need, the context you need, along with the data is sometimes very disparate, and so kind of driving decision making gets hard. And so kind of the current kind of iteration of AI, which is really the LLM or kind of generative side, really helps bring kind of context to data and therefore answer maybe questions more quickly, allow people to kind of explore more quickly, and therefore get decision making done more quickly in terms of whether they're choosing another provider, whether they're trying to locate a problem in their payment stack. And ideally, we want to bring the expertise level that's required to be productive in payments down a little bit so that smaller teams can be more effective or individuals can be more effective more quickly. So we kind of think about time to value being accelerated. Those are some of the ways that we think about kind of AI in its current form. I think the AI or the machine learning side that has been a long time player in fraud, in the fraud space or the fraud stopping space, has been developing quite a lot and is quite sophisticated now. So this adds a little bit to that.
Thank you so much. That's great. Tanvi, where would you see AI, given your experience, acting as more of a facilitator, for example, in the payments industry?
No, I do agree with what has just been said about AI being around for a long time. In the financial industry, I helped set up one of the biggest data science and AI center for one of the big banks here in Switzerland way back in 2016, 2017. So AI has been around, data has been around, machine learning has been around for a while. But the impact of all these technologies, given more the processing speed, more the possibility of much more accurate algorithms based on much more data feeding into them, has made the use of AI in payments a lot more applicable and a lot more visible to not just the operational teams processing payments, but also to the customers at the very end of the table. Now, AI chatbots and customer support, transaction management is very intriguing. It's Bank of America's Erica or PayPal's virtual assistant. Anyone who has used these apps are very familiar of how easy it is to interact with our payment providers and do not have to hold on to calls for long periods of time. Predictive analytics for customer retention and revenue growth is another very exciting space. We have seen, for example, Square's Cash App that utilizes machine learning to send personalized financial product suggestions, such as installment-based payments, to increase engagement and boost customer retention. So according to Square itself, the predictive analytics have led to a 20% increase in their customer engagement with these personalized offers. So all I'm trying to say with these examples of perhaps Bank of America's Erica's or PayPal's or Square App or Klarna, so to say, is it's not an option for the payment solutions to get their AI capabilities at power with the latest and the greatest, because the customers would have choices and they would be with the payment provider that can provide them the least amount of costs and the best experiences. And we have seen AI also being used dynamically in the pricing and the offers that are made to them. So this is more on the retail side of things. And I think the payment area also for the SMEs is taking a very exciting role when it comes to credit analysis and the loan payments that the payment providers can give them. I mean, we can delve deeper into each of these topics, but both from operational and from a customer engagement standpoint, we do see the international players taking a big leap of faith and going full on using AI, not just as a co-pilot, but also the front and center of the customer engagement. And we'll see more and more of this happening as time passes.
Yeah, we tend to think about AI as that Erica, like you said, but operational improvements, operational efficiency still feels like a space that not all players have equally adapted to, not all players have equally explored. So there's a lot of exciting opportunity out there as well. Sebas, what's your vision for AI adoption at Kushki, particularly in something like making payments more efficient and accessible across LATAM?
Yeah, I agree, substantially with what both Tammy and Albert have mentioned in terms of the evolution of AI in areas such as internal productivity and customer support. Where I think it's interesting in particular for us, kind of taking that internal external view externally, I think that Latin America, as kind of an exponentially developing market, will have this really interesting interface between AI and the consumer that maybe won't be seen as viscerally in other markets. In other words, that leapfrogging effect, I think, will be very pronounced in Latin America, both from the perspective of people just being innately comfortable with interacting with new technologies, as well as kind of a generational aspect, right? And in Latin America, the penetration of internet and smartphones is very, very, very high in that sense, even in unbanked populations. So my guess is that I think people will be increasingly more comfortable in interacting with AIs than even with sort of legacy players, right? Sometimes in markets such as ours, there isn't that high of a trust level in institutions such as banks or regulators, and I think this instantaneous interaction that AI provides to consumers could, interestingly or curiously, increase that aspect of trust. And so I expect, especially the front-facing part of AI towards consumers, to be very very rapid in Latin America. And internally, as all of you actually have already mentioned from an operational perspective, I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in areas such as customer support, cybersecurity. But I think what's most interesting for us in Kushki is, as we give tooling to our employees, to sort of understanding how they can use it in nonlinear or dynamic ways, right? So the really powerful thing about Gen AI is that if you have a question and you want to ask it about how to connect the dots between that question, it can kind of point you halfway there. And so I'm really excited to see how our employees and how we use AI to really ask unstructured questions towards being more strategic in our day to day and sort of connecting dots that we wouldn't have otherwise seen in that sense.
Oh, I was just going to jump in and just kind of second that point from Sebastian, because I think the ability, I know in our team, even our being a small company, that ability to explore for kind of outcomes is actually accelerated quite a bit with things like I probably shouldn't mention any names, but I think all the tooling, Claude, OpenAI, all these companies are basically allowing people, even junior employees, come in and actually explore much more quickly inside kind of the information that the internet has put into these models, and actually get strategic more quickly, but also look across multiple options. And again, payments is super complicated, but it could really be anything from product to engineering. It can be mapping things more quickly, understanding it. So we definitely see that. I see senior people all the way down to junior people inside of Pagos that are actually using these tools just to be more productive internally, which then ideally would translate for customers too. So.
Yeah, and just to even complement that further. So for let's take like someone that's in a business analyst kind of role, right? And maybe they have ideated a new way of slicing and dicing the data, sort of the traditional way to even get sort of a very rough cut MVP of what that KPI or dashboard evolution looks like would be, to talk with product, mock it up, and then look at the data architecture in and of itself. 9 times out of 10, you'll find that whatever you have in your data currently probably will not function for this new sort of slice that you want to take a look at. Will require editing schemas and tables and this sort of thing. The really cool thing about generative AI in particular is that it doesn't have to be exact to be able to give you some really interesting insights, right? You don't have to go and make a ton of really sort of deep changes to how your data flows within the company to actually be able to experiment in this way. Of course, later, if you come up with like a really great KPI that you want to visualize to the entire company and be updating that data constantly, pinging generative AI like once every minute for that report is probably not the most cost efficient way to do it in scale, right? But you use it that capability to sort of flesh it out and get insights very, very quickly before actually starting to do sort of let's call it more traditional automation around it, right? And so I think that's very, very powerful. And as you said, Albert, can literally be from someone junior that just joined the company all the way up to the C-suite in that sense.
Yeah.
So, Tanvi, is there anything you would like to add?
No, it's fascinating to see how people are exploring and understanding the experimentation part of what AI can do. I think it's also going to the point that intelligence is now available without people have to learn another language to get to intelligence. And as long as organizations like Pagos and Kushki and many others can interpret their own intelligence with the use of available tools, I think there's a lot of value that can be added in both operationally as well as for the customer experience. I think we have not spoken so much about the operational side of what AI can really do because obviously in payments, cost is the key. And to reduce the cost of payments per payment, transaction cost is the holy grail of making the payment platform tick, specifically in very price-sensitive markets like Asia and Latin America. So what would be the best ideas at topics which are not just RPAs, which is automation of existing processes, but also looking at solving and streamlining the processes that goes under and behind to, first of all, reduce the cost of transaction and the time it takes for a transaction to go through. And I think for now, we've been discussing transactions within locally and domestically. Things get even more complicated when we talk about cross-border payment solutions. I think what we are seeing here at the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, a lot of experimentation around payments to be able to solve the cross-border payment, both from a cost as well as from a timing standpoint. And projects like Fintranet, and I've been in Basel just a month before to deep dive on Fintranet, which is now becoming an experiment primarily with the central banks and the commercial banks, but very soon, hopefully by the end of 2025 and 26, it will be available for many payment platforms to start plugging in, which is all the effort from the central banks to be able to reduce the operational cost and time frame of cross-border payments.
Thank you so much, Tanvi. I will want to swing back to this right before we close out for today. which is, yes, we've got all these great things that we can do, but one of the hard things is getting an entire organization to move in the same direction. So before we close out today, I do want us to think about that a little bit, right? What does it actually then take to bring those potentially cross-border teams from different walks of life to all walk in that same direction, understanding that AI is transforming the business and what it is that they need to know in order to effectively use it in the workplace. But before we go there, I'd love to chat a little bit about those payment companies that are either building, buying, or borrowing AI solutions that they feel are going to reinvent payments, right? Because as you mentioned, there's RPAs, we can automate, we can augment all that we want, but what about the actual reinvention? So do any of you want to share your thoughts on that? What could payments look like in 10 years, for example, if we give it a moonshot thinking, if we give it a total free brain type of experience? How could we think about payments then?
Maybe I'll start off, Jos, in that sense. I think a company that's obviously made a lot of noise recently in terms of how it's implemented AI in our space, or I guess in an sort of a broader adjacent space, is Klarna, right? But I think Klarna is interesting not necessarily for the reasons that are kind of headline the industry, and I think there is sort of a very complex conversation in the future of what it means for AI to potentially replace some jobs and then evolve others. In that sense, is very much an open question. But I think that the most interesting thing that Klarna has done, kind of referencing the earlier part of this conversation, is that tech companies tend to have a lot of tooling, right? And the fundamental uh, reason that tooling exists is because the sort of overhead of structuring a certain data set and then building a business logic to do XYZ that might not be in your core, a sales CRM, or a support chatbot and FAQ center, etc. In our case, that we're payments companies, they're ancillary functions. They're very important operationally, but they're not part of our core. And so you buy tooling, right? But the power of AI is that in a lot of cases that tooling can disappear, because you can ask an AI, hey, here's my data set, here's kind of the objective output that I need. Can you give it to me? And in a lot of cases, I think the short answer will be yes, and the sort of the more longer term answer will be um, yes, and here's a much simpler way where you can either continue to use that third party tooling, but in a much more drastically simpler way, or become so simplified in the abstract that it is then becomes worth it for your own development teams to attack in that sense. So Klarna has kind of gone all in that aspect, and has disintermediated things that are pretty core to a lot of technology companies, right? Like Salesforce, and even Slack, and these kind of things, right? And so I don't know how far they're going to get, and if they're going to disintermediate the totality of third-party tooling in that sense. But I think that approach is super interesting, because that build versus buy and borrow dynamic, Jos, I think gets fundamentally transformed with generative AI, because it allows you to ask an additional question, which is simplify first. You can simplify with a general AI, and then decide if you want to build, buy or borrow in that sense.
Yeah, I think what makes AI interesting from a customer perspective, I think also makes it interesting for all the reasons you mentioned inside of a company, because I think what is usually the struggle is kind of context with data, right? And I think the generative AI or the LLM approach actually brings context, the ability to map context in to what traditionally would have been a data problem. Once you combine context with data, you can actually allow people to actually answer things more quickly. I still think there's a 5% problem which is what in the future, maybe that goes from 5 to 3 to 2, which is that you can, let's say generative AI plus compliance might be hard because you can't be 2% wrong. You have to be 100% right.
Right.
But enabling people to explore and also more quickly get, whether it's customer service or even internally, to your point, I think it reduces the friction of kind of adding context to data, and therefore a lot of things that would have taken a lot of time as a prerequisite before you make a decision probably get faster. So I would imagine from a pure payments processing perspective, what that means is fraud analysts will become more productive, which can reduce costs. I think a lot of the areas where we've built a lot of systems to do the game of telephone and store and forward and things like that might get a little bit more efficient. That can translate into faster customer experiences, faster payments, less risk. Some of those things is really about enabling or supercharging the teams that are there now managing things to be super productive. That probably helps kind of efficiency, which then probably helps cost. I don't know. I think about my kids. They're a little bit older than yours, Sebastian, but I think I'm not sure I'm not sure the way they pay will change because of AI, because they are already moving on to kind of different ways of paying that are going to be even more mobile. Probably, there's some challenges, whether it's from crypto, whether it's from just account to account. Some of these things are already in flight. Does AI accelerate some of that? Maybe, but I think demographics is also going to push that. And then the rest of us doing kind of payments work are probably just going to use AI to keep up, right? In a way. So yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying.
Thank you, Albert. Thank you so much. Tanvi, you have actual experience. I started with AI in 2019. You mentioned 2016. I want to hear some of your success stories. Why don't you tell us, obviously no names needed, but a case story, a case study that you can look back on and say, wow, the teams were in the right place. The way we thought about technology was aligned, and we saw the results and more that we had hoped for.
Yeah, peer-to-peer transactions has been always the story. So we started our journey way before COVID, and just locally here in Switzerland, both Credit Suisse and UBS as big banks only do domestic payments here in this country. You don't see domestic payments in any other part of the world. They're primarily the private banks there. And it has been a very cash-dominated industry, although Bitcoin is sold at the ATMs here. You can get it in the post offices. You can go buy Bitcoin as pensioners. So very open to the crypto universe. But again, before COVID, it had been a very cash-oriented economy. And we, within the big banks, have always been wondering why our online banking platforms have not been a hit. And millions of dollars have been spent across all the different private banks who have domestic markets. So you could imagine like international teams doing the best of the technology possible to make this happen. And then we decided that perhaps we should have a common interface, irrespective of what the different banks are providing their interfaces with. And we started with the platform of Twint. I would say me and my teams were a big part of making that happen, and obviously with the help of all the other respective banks within Switzerland. It was not a very welcome project by many of the senior executives at the bank, because obviously you're trying to do a consortia-based exercise specifically on a payments topic, which is usually the bread and butter of banks, and they don't want to part with that. And for the first 1 month, we didn't have enough transactions into it. And then COVID hit. And with COVID, anybody and everybody was not doing cash anymore, and Twint became the norm. It's been one of the most successful stories in Europe for cashless payments and peer-to-peer transactions, and it had been a resounding success since. Even the goods and services like cheese and grapes and cherries are sold outside the firms, and Twint is accepted. No cash anymore, no pennies, no dollars, no francs anymore in the Swiss economy. Now, hardly see cash here since the advent of Twint. But I'll go one step forward, right? With Twint as well, our underlying platform is Visa and MasterCard. So the transaction fee of doing a Twint payment is not very different than what you would have done otherwise on an online banking platform. And in that context, I had the opportunity to work very closely with the India UPI system, the Unified Payment Interface, which is the open source platforms. I know a few countries in Africa are trying to mimic that. And since it's based on the India tech stack, which is absolutely open source, their peer-to-peer platform, Paytm, is extremely successful in the sense that they have almost zero transaction fee. And the usability of their platform is not very different from what we had created with Twint. So as I said, right, the two basic things that would remain key as we continue to keep making progress in the payment industry is the usability and the ease with which people can do payments. They should not do more than 2 clicks at most for doing any kind of payments, and that should be secure, fraudulent proof, which most of the payment card industry has done tremendous amount of work already. And the second is it should be almost zero transaction cost, including cross-border payments. And whether it's AI or AI and blockchain together that helps solve that issue, that is a trend to come. Because why should we be paying for payments if it is our own money that we are willing to spend? So I do think that the middlemen in the process would have a difficult time in the next 5 to 10 years as the technology takes center stage.
No, thank you so much for that insightful answer, Tanvi. I really appreciate it. And currently on the African continent, and could agree with you, there's a lot actually that happens here again where you see some leapfrog adoption where different stacks are being adopted into the space just because it can happen and we have less legacy models. So if we start thinking about some of the challenges, we have spoken about all the opportunities out there. I'd like to ask all three of you, what would you have liked to have known 6 months ago about AI and payments? So if you look back at yourself 6 months ago, what's something you wish you'd known then that you only know now? Albert, I'm happy to start with you.
6 months ago, I think the acceleration of the kind of the curve in terms of generative AI, I think it's just continued to be very surprising. So if anything, I think it forces companies like us to think about how does the product evolve? How does, in a way where very much it can be considered in some cases like tooling, how does it make our product even, or the way that you interact with data and with analytics and with services even easier, right? I think it begs the question on does the way that we interact with even existing tools, is that paradigm or is that way of interacting, do we have to take a bigger leap to change? So that's the thing, just as a kind of founder in the space, just thinking about how much will change in the way that people interact with some of the core processes, the core data, and how can we make it easier? And I think for us, the old people are empowered now to ask questions and explore with some of the kind of generative AI and LLM approaches. It means people probably have less desire. More people want to use data. More people are asking questions. They're being trained by the open AIs and the Claudes and all of the models that are out there, which means that the interactions with products is probably going to change. And so it's just, I would love to know how the curve is developing and just stay ahead of it. So that's probably the biggest thing for me.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. What about yourself,
Albert
Sebas?
has mentioned, and sort of seeing how quickly the models have really evolved to take very unstructured, very specific questions and actually return insightful answers has kind of been mind-blowing, honestly. I think the other thing that has also been fascinating to see in the last 6 months has been kind of the more, I guess, robust emergence of multimodal AIs, right? And so seeing this crossplay between text and video and image and being able to query a single model from different aspects, and then having that model implicitly sort of understand the context and then be able to switch. That is super intriguing to me, and it actually has made me sort of ask questions around a use of AI that I think 6-12 months ago would have kind of seemed impossible, honestly, right? So for example, in in security, Albert, I think, mentioned this earlier in the conversation. AI has been used in security applications, for decades now, right? It's very driven on machine learning and deep learning. A lot of it is supervised learning. Some of it is unsupervised learning, but supervised learning actually works pretty well in that sense, except for like extreme outliers or new kinds of outliers that maybe a neural net hasn't seen before in the data. And so this sort of multimodal that can go from text to image, and I'm guessing even going back into the data itself eventually, right? So this really weird sort of hybrid between a Gen AI talking with sort of a more traditional, now if you will, a deep learning network to identify security threats, I think will be super interesting. Like I can imagine, a security analyst in an OC somewhere, right? They're already super used to sort of leveraging AI to create alarms and alerts and this sort of thing. Then actually be able to ask AI, hey, here's what my transaction throughput looks today. Does this seem off to you, right? Like it's almost unmathematical in a way, which is bizarre when you think about like security applications that are driven by machine learning or deep learning. But I think it'll be really interesting to see sort of that hybrid approach evolve in the future.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Sebas. And to you, Tanvi, for the closing remarks on this question.
Yeah, as we all know, Joss, on the Gutenberg moments, right? AI falls within the category of an innovative technology that innovates and that doubles every 2.5 months. So the excitement and the enlightenment we see every time a new release of one of these big LLM platforms comes to life, or we see Harvey coming to life being used by most of the lawyers right now on the planet, not just an experiment with a few American firms. You see, how the hell did this happen so quickly? But if a technology is innovating doubly as fast every 2.5 months, that is definitely acceptable. I do agree with both Albert and Sebastian on the examples they put forward. What I'm very excited and could not have imagined 6 months back is the agent-to-agent orchestration. How the agents are talking to the other agents and making solutions and coming across as a very intelligent individual you can brainstorm with. And increasingly, depending on your use cases, there are tools out there that you can use. A Claude agent talking to a Google Notebook LM agent, to a Perplexity agent for doing searches versus to a ChatGPT agent. So the possibility of the agent-to-agent conversation for making your own personalized solutions, whether it's your personal diary booking or whether it's your own sort of research for a particular technology that I do on a day-to-day basis, but then also to find out, what do I really want to buy? How many of us have spent hours online browsing the best deal for the best shoes we might want to like, right? Imagine there are tools out there, and in the next 2.5 months, I'm sure one of the payment platforms, if not Klarna, will make this available to us. You just asking for a pair of shoes under $150, and the agent can exactly tell you which is the best platform right now and which is the best shoes according to your shoe objectivity and the history of what you have bought in the past, that you can just do a double click at max and buy. So that is what I would not have imagined 6 months back, but I'm seeing a lot of experiments happening today. And hopefully by the end of the year and at max by Q1 next year, I would assume one of the payment platforms would make that functionality available for people to use. So exciting times ahead for payments. I do believe that Latin America is as fertile a land for trying and testing new forms of payments as the rest of Asia is. Unfortunately, in Europe, we have a lot of legacy systems to work with. To try and bring anything new is a lot of money, it's a lot of effort, but the two economies in Latin America and Asia are already innovating. And as you're saying, Joss, in Africa, it's just greenfields. So perhaps we are going to start seeing metaverse shopping and whatnot coming to Africa first before it touches all of us on the planet here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all your insights today to the panel of experts that we've had joining us. And I really strongly believe we should schedule a follow-up Kushki Talk to dive a little bit deeper into actual implementation. I know that listeners are probably curious about how do we actually make all these great ideas around payments then come to life. And I don't want to spill the beans too much, but implementation is really where it's at. We can dream and we can think and we can theorize, but we want to also have the skills to roll up our sleeves and get our teams moving in one direction, especially now, so we can capitalize on what this exponential technology has to offer. For now, though, I want to thank you for listening to this edition of Kushki Talks. It was an absolute pleasure to have Albert, Tanvi, and Sebas join me today on this episode, and we look forward to welcoming you all back soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.